Yeah, we got so. Um, I think we're streaming. I can't. The computer doesn't sing, dude.
So we don't know what is going on with the computer. It's the updates are crashing the program and the computer, and so the updates are a nuisance to begin with. So anyway, we've had nothing but problems with this program in this computer. So I'll probably have to spend even more money buying another computer that will handle a big bloated program. So that's why we're late, even though she started an hour ago trying to get everything going. The Microsoft updates and all the other updates on the program. There's nothing good to say. Has anybody got anything good to say about Microsoft?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway,
kind of you just make your deal with the devil.
right. So sooner or later, Microsoft will be gone. It's just a matter of time. Um, I had somebody ask me how did I could I give more information on how I came up with doing the kind of metal roofs that I do on mobile homes and houses, but mostly mobile homes. And I thought I would do that. But in order to explain how some of these things happen, you have to understand how I came into working to begin with. Uh, when I was a kid, you had to keep me busy because I was probably would have been medicated, now.
You're ADD on H in HD.
Right. So,
Even now.
so what my father did was keep me working. So we would pull nails out of wood and clean the wood up, straighten them up, roll them and straighten them, and put them in jars after dipping them in oil. And that way, poor people make everything count. Um, so I was involved in that and in all those hands-on hand saws and hammers and pry bars and at a very early age. So then I went on. Let's just skip a little bit. My father was a good teacher and was pretty patient. I have to give him credit with me in particular because I was the most challenging. Uh, which I probably will do a video just about my dad, just in tribute to my dad. But anyway, he was a union electrician, and so he was passing on details that he was pressured into, and he had responsibilities because his father up and left his mother, and he took on all the responsibilities at that age, very early age. He went through union school, electrician school, and all that. So yeah, I was involved with electrical work, and then as I grew older, I went with him on jobs during the summertime, and sometimes, occasionally, whenever school was in at night. But mostly it's in the summertime, and we moved a lot, trying to follow the work and such. And then my dad got into a partnership with a guy who had a concrete business, and they bought a body shop. So I worked there during school. They had a feed store. Sometimes I worked a little bit there, not as much. And they had a log cabin kit in business where they would build log cabins. It came out of Eureka Springs, Arkansas. That I don't think they're around anymore. But they had franchise and they would build cabins and such as that. All that was tied up in these three partners, all my dad's friends, and so we went through all I was in concrete in the summertime, and during school I would go after school to the body shop. So all those kind of things kind of led up building forms and pouring concrete made you appreciate the lighter work. So when I went moved away from home from East Texas, Jasper, Lufkin area, over to Austin where my grandmother was, and my uncle, which was 1 year younger than me, I got work with a company that was doing streets, curbs, and drains, and bridges, and all kinds of things. I'd already had a lot of different uh, experience with building different types of forms for round tanks and so on. So I started working with wood quite a bit, but it wasn't too long, and I'm going to make the story short. these guys were doing what they could to get me to go back home, and I just didn't want to go back home. And Austin's a big old town, so my uncle had been another on my aunt had married this guy named Russell Pachinella. Really nice to me, always trying to get me to come to work for him. But I also worked on my grandmother's house after hours, after doing concrete work. Then I'd go to work with him on the weekends and afternoons, building an addition for my grandmother, which I did because I was trying to help my grandmother. But what I was really doing was helping my uncle, because he traded the addition onto my grandmother's house for 5 acres or something like that. And I don't know, that acreage sold for $100,000 an acre. You know, imagine this little cheap. Anyway, I got experience, and he said, "Hey, you want to come to work for me?" And he always talked to me. And finally, they were pressing me out of the concrete business, I moved into metal stud. And metal stud was a natural thing to me. Uh, Metal stud, and then drywall, and then acoustical ceilings, and uh, drywall finishing, Rayco systems, H-board systems, and around elevator shafts. It was a whole world of commercial and industrial metal stud and drywall that I had never even thought about as a young man. So I was getting a crash course in all these different systems. And I really took to metal stud. I really like it. To this day, I still like using metal stud. And in that time period, people were using metal stud to build roofs over mobile homes. So almost all your mobile homes then were rounded roof, and nobody wanted that because it was rumbling around, and it had issues with leaks and things like that around vents. And so everybody was trying to figure out ways. So they would build a 1.5 inch wide hollow metal stud. And so I worked with some guys on that, and we called it spaghetti stud because it's so flimsy. You have to support it a whole lot. And so we were kind of like, hey, just use this. This will give us the lightweight that we need, and we'll get to. And it did a good job. Didn't have any insulation because nobody knew any better, but it looked really good. It ended up with a soffit and fascia hangover, so that kind of led me into other things. But eventually I left Texas and went to Florida, and did all kinds of elaborate metal stud things there. I worked on Universal Studios when it first started up in Orlando. I worked on MGM Theater, Epcot, Splash Mountain, Quest Studios, and on and on. MGM was interesting too. But all around the Orlando area. But I also worked on a lot of hospitals later on in Ocala when I was a foreman, and then later a field superintendent. So it was a crash course into all these elaborate things. And as a matter of fact, we built things called log walks. And then I come up with my own method. They said, here's how we've been doing it, but you come up with your own. And so the foreman that I was working for Tony Powell, great guy, said, hey, I'm going to let you run. See what you think about this. And instead of, everybody was building those log walks, which is what you walk through to check on the postal workers. They poured concrete inside the, walkways and put in special windows with, you couldn't tell if somebody's there. There's no shadow. But it was all up in the air. So what they do is they build them on the ground and have a forklift to lift them up. And it was all kinds of problems with getting them to be straight and not being braced properly in the right height. So I just said, I'm just going to build it in the air, and they can pour concrete in it if they want. So I built all that, and it was going so quick, the first one I did, that they wanted to video me. I was like, I don't care. I probably could have made a big deal about it, and from that point on, everybody else was doing it that way. So I learned a lot about letting it ride, and seeing how things work and adjusting. There's nobody that has a science to it that I'm aware of. But there's a lot of things you can do with metal stud you're just not going to be able to do with wood at all. And say nothing of It does not rot. It will rust eventually. It does not bow when it gets moist. Does not twist because it used to be a tree. It does not burn. Okay. It is very, very lightweight. You know, I used to carry 4 bundles, 2 under each arm, 10 foot long. So that's 40 10-foot long studs under my arms. So I already knew metal stud was the way to go if I was going to build a metal roof. So what happened when I first came up into the Arkansas area, trying to hold my marriage together? So I stepped off from the field superintendent.
Your first marriage.
Yeah. Trying to hold that marriage together, and my uncle was up here. My dad was working with him, so there's like, hey, you know, somewhere down the line we end up, hey, we're gonna put roofs on mobile homes. We need to come up with a way because it's fastened, you know, the metal to the tin of that roof is just horrible. It's a horrible idea. I was like, well, what we did down in Texas is we've used 1.5-inch metal stud, but I'd rather use 3.5. And they was like, I was talking Greek. I mean, they might have seen it, might have been around it. My dad definitely had been. Highly experienced electrician and very experienced with a lot of other things, but he, you know, they were totally out of it. So I started doing it with 3 5/8 metal stud, and on the premise that you gotta, you know, make it like a rafter on a house. So I built peaked roofs, 3 5/8 metal stud, and I brought it down instead of building it up high. I brought it down as close as I could to that roof, and then I started using 3-inch foam in between on 2-foot centers. It was expensive way back then, and it's horrible expensive now. But I mean, the people that, you know, I do work for, they would say, we can feel it as you're doing it. We can feel the heat getting less as you're going down the roof. So I was putting in the foam, and but we had to come up with something different. It was just, you know, we were making money, but it wasn't very quick, and it wasn't very, you know, it was a lot of work. And I saw the next one I did, I was like, well, why don't we you know, try fasten it directly to the tin itself? And that just didn't work. It was horrible. And I was like, okay, we're going to rearrange, and we'll run what you call drywall channel, which is it's kind of shaped like a hat. It has a 3/4 lip or a 1/2-inch lip, and then it goes up 1 inch, and then across 1.5 inches, and then down, or 1.25 inches, and then down that, and then so it's like a hat, but you know, that wide. And so I started running those strips of metal every 2 feet. Now I started adjusting, and I would screw through that metal lip into the rafters, and guess what? That was pretty good. The problem got to be, it's kind of tricky trying to find where that hi-hat or drywall DWC drywall channel, finding it, you know, that 1.25 inches wide when you're on it, going through the metal into it. But what we were doing in between that was cutting the foam to fit. So we were buying 4x8 sheets of 3/4 foam and putting it in between. I was like, well, why can't we just slide it up till it's more than 2 foot, so we can have 2-foot panels and get 2 strips out of 1 4-foot instead of, you know, 2 21 and 22 or 23.5 pieces, you know. So I started changing the layouts, and started realizing at some point, you know, it became obvious that, you know, at first I didn't really know, you know, that I was just doing it for insulation purposes. I wasn't really doing it for the condensation. But what happened was I started getting calls for people to ask me to fix the roof that somebody else had put on a house. So when I took the metal roof off to see why it was leaking, you know, became, you know, you literally take the metal off, and you could see the dew and condensation on the backside of the metal, and it's like, oh, well, obviously that's going to run until it finds a hole, which they would nail the 2x4s to the shingles of a house, and of course, if the wind comes along, the wind's going to pull those nails out. I mean, it might be screwed on the metal to the 2x, but the 2x were nailed down with air nailers. So, you know, I've seen it over and over again. So these guys will use 2x4s because that's something they're very familiar with. And the problem got to be they would start leaking, and it wouldn't leak right away. It might drip down into the insulation down below before it actually soak down into the drywall. Maybe not. Maybe it'll go fast. But that condensation was the problem. And I got, okay, so not only do I need it for insulation, we need to have it for keeping condensation, that difference between the outside and the inside. So, you know, I worked around windows and things like that, and so I got to notice, and you know, single pane windows tend to sweat and it runs down. That's because the outside temperature is different than the inside temperature, and that difference causes condensation. Same would apply to the metal roof. I was not a fan of putting shingles on. I have done it. I just don't care for it. I don't see any purpose, because in this area, you know, in Northwest Arkansas, I think the statistics are that if there's a 3-year period, we will have 4 episodes in a 3-year period, 4 episodes of over 90-mile-an-hour winds.
If not more.
So more than once a year. And then we get a whole lot of 60-mile-an-hour winds. So that rips shingles off, and the roofing companies around here stay busy. I can't speak for a whole lot of other places, but I do know that that's the issue elsewhere. Shingles each one is held by at least 3 nails, and when a high wind comes along, it just tears them off, because that material, that tar material, will just rip on the staple or the nail. It'll just completely come off in sections. By the way, all these people that don't want us to use oil need to understand that shingles are made from oil-based products. The pavement going up to the house is oil-based products. The plastic that is on everything, including cars, is oil-based. The paint, a lot of times, is oil-based. So, get back. I didn't much care for shingles because they were always a problem and people wanted to get away from them. To this point, probably 15 years ago, people would actually get a discount. I think 15 years ago they got an Energy Star rating for metal roofs, so you would actually it was actually considered a good energy savings. And so I did a video on the temperature of a shingle roof right next to metal, and the metal put on the shingles. It's dramatic, 15-20 degrees sometimes, maybe more. That's without insulation. That's directly to the shingles. Now, you know, I did do metal roofs directly to the shingles, and everybody's like, oh, you can't do that. And of course, I was timid about it because I haven't been a roofer all this time. And, you know, I was like, this don't make any sense. They said, oh, it'll move, it'll rust. So, I've been in this area almost 30 years, and I was doing metal roofs right away. So 28 years later, I don't have any problem with anybody calling up, say, hey man, that roof just rotted totally out. It's not happened. Now you can probably come up with somewhere, maybe I've not seen it where the metal just rusted totally out. I've not seen it. And I've been on metal roofs that have been up, you know, barn tin roofs with just galvanized metal, which I did work on that. I kind of skipped over that. Worked for a company that built awnings, and we did gym roofs with ribbed metal. I forgot what they call that, corrugated metal, galvanized. And so I'm well aware of the lead head nails and such. So anyway, I was just not much into doing shingles, and the metal roof fastened directly to shingles. People will say you can't do it, you can't do it, it's wrong. And of course, I went on and didn't have. Yeah, to this day, people still say you don't know what you're talking about. Da, 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 da. So, what I'm willing to change, but if I get a metal roof to last 30 years, is that not better than most of your shingle roofs? Even if you have a warranty for 30 years, shingles, it's a warranty based on when the wind comes along, blows it off. You get, however long it was there, subtracted from the warranty, and it does not count for labor. It just is the material. Okay, if the company's still in business. So, do you want to deal with the constant upgrades in labor and the insurance that's connected to it? Used to be that insurance was an issue, but now it's a major issue. Not only insurance for the workman's comp, but also for the liability. They're almost the same. So those are pushing hard, all those companies that have those employees doing things. So anyway, metal roof was just better to me because I wasn't using nails, I was using screws, and I was around screws the whole time I was in metal stud work. So, and as time went by, I did more and more the 3/4 foam. I got away from the 4x8 sheets and went to what they call perimeter foam, which it's a 2 foot by 8 foot long 3/4 foam with no foil on it, no, smooth side. It's just, semi-porous, and it was less expensive, but it was also 2 foot by 8 foot. It was exactly what I needed, and so I started using that, and I started the metal stud guys started getting all saucy and started getting more expensive than 1x4. So I went to 1x4s because I found places where I could get 1x4s that were less expensive than metal. I was like, hey guys, you're kicking yourself in the shins. Why are you doing that? Well, because wood went up, we can go with metal. Well, how about we just take out wood and keep it inexpensive? There's no reason just because wood went up. Anyway, I moved to 1x4s, which gave me even more space to catch those that metal, with the screws through it. And it tended to smooth out the roof up and downs and imperfections, which there are a lot of them, because it would be wider and not necessarily straighter, but wider. And believe me, that really made a difference. I never ever, maybe one roof I probably did with 2x4s. That was because the customer wanted me to, but it didn't take long for him to figure out that was a bad idea. Because sometimes 2x4s just wouldn't follow that roof of a mobile home at all. And, there's a lot of other issues with using 2x4s on top of a mobile home roof or even a shingle roof. But I use screws on everything. Okay, screws would fasten the 1x4s through the metal into the rafters. That was highly important. It became very obvious to me that's what it was needed. And so the more I used the 1x4s, the more I realized I needed less foam. And then I think about 10 years ago, they came up with Pro-Dex. And it was kind of like, hey, try this out, see what you think about it. And I was like, man, this is great. Only problem I have with it is that the wind would blow it around, but that was the same problem with the regular foam. So I went from 3-inch foam to 3/4 foam, maybe some 1-inch foam, 4x8 sheets to 2x8 sheets, and now I'm using rolls of 3 foot wide, 4 foot wide Pro-Dex, where one sticks to the other. Now you also have double bubble, which is available everywhere, and I have learned that sticking one to the other is nice, but really what you end up having to do is staple it down to the 1x4s. And even still, people would ask me, hey, can you make this rounded roof mobile home? And I did, frame it out of 3 5/8 metal stud and make a peaked roof with a soffit and fascia where the mobile home didn't have it. And I would do it over and over again. I remember one roof was over 113 degrees, and I framed it all up with braces and everything. It looked really nice, and we used 1x4s fastened through the bottom, short ones I had to, so it wouldn't stick out and be a problem on the metal, and because I needed the wood. And again, I used a foam, and it was a really nice roof. And that was back, I would do a 70-foot mobile home metal roof with metal stud for less than $3,000. Okay. As a matter of fact, that same number, I would go inside, tear out all the floors, put in new plywood and new floor for $3,000. That shows you how long ago that was. So anyway, I got to where there was an older gentleman over in Hinkle Park, and that doesn't mean nothing to you guys, but he's saying, is there any way you can reduce that cost? That $3,000 is, or it's just too much, and I don't really need it. I just need to keep this roof so I don't have to have water dealing coming in all the time. Can you do something about it? Because I'm tired of all the coating the roof every couple of years. I said, yeah, let me try. You don't mind me experimenting. So I started running the 1x4s instead of on metal stud or on a peaked roof, peaked metal roof. The rounded roof, I was like, man, maybe I can bend it and go to a 29 gauge metal, and I can maybe see it. Man, I remember being really worried that it was going to break and going to kink, going to have mark problems. But amazingly enough, it did not. And he did not want me to put foam on. He wanted to save the money. Of course, that was a problem later on, but he didn't care. It was nowhere near as bad as it was. His roof was coming apart at the seams because it had not been coated. So it had rusted in many, many places. But he was like, well, this is way better. Even though I am leaking, you did tell me that I need to have some kind of insulation. But man, I'm so happy with you. And he didn't live much longer, probably less than 5-6 years he died. And that house got moved with that metal roof, and they asked me to come fix that metal roof. And I said, well, what needs to be done is put the foam in. Guess what? They paid me to put the foam in. So that was back when I was using perimeter foam, that 2x8 perimeter foam. You stick to the block walls, and you put tar on and you stick it on and you insulate your block wall basements. So there wasn't a whole lot of basements being done around here. There was some, but not a lot. So the company that I was buying it from went out of business. It was a big lumber company, national, and I don't know why, but I was also getting hardy board from and doing siding on houses with it, which hardy board's still around, but now it's mostly lap siding and such. There are some 4x8 sheets out there, and you see it on apartment complexes. I started using it probably first, and then not long after that, Lindsay Homes started doing that up high, so they didn't have to have brick up there. It's a lot cheaper than brick. And so anyway, I was connected to that company and was like, what in the world? You're out of business? Yeah. It's like, where do I get this foam from? And so I started having to be creative with different kinds of foam. And I used a lot of that 1/2 inch and 3/4 foil faced. And people would say, oh, well, the foil makes all the difference. I'm going to tell you right now, it doesn't. Now, what I have questions about is how long the R factor or the insulation factor actually lasts. My viewpoint, what I've understood is the foam degrades as far as an insulation factor or R factor over time, but it does stop that condensation from happening. But I haven't seen a problem in the 30 years that I've been involved. I guess I might have to live to be 100 and say, well, it's lasted 50, 60 years. So what happened was I started bending that metal over, and slowly, man, I was just, the first 5 or 6, I was always like, oh, this is it's gonna be a problem. but it end up not being a problem at all. The problems that you have are unique problems to mobile homes. Um, and here's why. So, like, if you want to have an overhang, which you will, say 3 inches, and you're going down there and you're keeping everything straight, you're fastening things from one side to the other or from one end to over the top. You're thinking, man, I've got it lined up. I'm lined up every step of the way, and it's really straight. But guess what? You're getting closer to the side of the house. I'm like, I gotta start cheating it out. So you start trying to spread the metal, and that's not what it end up being is the side of a mobile home, albeit it looks straight, it is not straight. Okay, you can take a 2x4 and pull a string really tight. Maybe take a laser now at nighttime or when daylight will allow you maybe, and measure to that side of that house. Depending on how that house traveled down the road, it's going to be in and out. So here now that metal is not going straight. That mobile home is not really straight. And so you like, oh man, I got to start cheating it. So I end up trying to come up with a way, and I actually had a special metal made trim that they got used to it to try to keep that from looking so bad. But again, it's like, is there any way we can save some money? Because this is kept getting more and more expensive, and to this day, I think last year they told me that the metal supplier said, yeah, the metals went up every month except 1 month. It went up twice that month. So constant higher prices have caused me to. There's people that say, can I get it to hang over a foot? Yes, I can. Is there a problem with it? Yeah, if you stand on it out there, it's a problem. But other than that, wind is not an issue. Now, how do I know that? Because I did one on a single wide, and they decided to move. They said they were never going to move. And I said, I don't know. That might be a problem. No, we're never going to move. Well, guess what? They decided to move. Well, when they did, the width of the roof was far beyond any permit was going to allow you without special permits, because that is no longer a 16-foot roof. It's a 17-foot 6 roof or something like that. And by the way, when mobile homes measure, they measure from the tip of the steel tongue to the back of the house, whatever's sticking out. And when they measure the width, they measure they say it's a 16 wide. They measure to the outside of those little jelly jar lights by the door. That's 16. The walls are actually smaller. So whenever you hang a metal roof off of that, it's far beyond 16. An actual, I think paved roads are around 9'6", 9 foot, somewhere in there. So 18 foot wide, and you're running with a mobile home that actual width is 16, 17 foot wide. Yeah. So when you go to measure it, they are saying, hey, this is a special permit. You're going to have to pay more, Eventually, what happened with those metal roofs, and I was the only one doing it in this area, and still not many people do, even though they've seen all the success, But what they would do is, hey, we're just going to tell them it's a regular 15 wide, and we're going to go down the road. Now, that roof hanging off gets caught by tree limbs and gets kind of wrinkled a bit, or if it runs onto a phone line or something like that, it'll cut it. I did build quite a few of them with a soffit and fascia out, and brought in plastic soffit, brought in fascia down. There's another guy that is on YouTube for longer than me, like, I don't know, 13, 14 years. His name is Drew's Roofing and Home Repair. He does very good work. But he does an overhang with plywood, and then he puts a piece of wood and then comes back over with like a soffit material and puts a fascia on it. But he's not doing so much metal roof, he's doing rubber over with a piece of metal strip with screws to hold that rubber in place. And if you want a gutter, you can put a gutter in. He's kind of he's doing it that way. I had the people to that point were saying, is there a way you can make it less expensive? Imagine that. So I started adjusting things. So hey, this is what we can do. Some of them my competition, which was my family, uh, would buy seconds and then sell it as it had 40-year warranty, which got them in trouble because some of those seconds had less paint on the metal. But sometimes it's just the end of the roll and da 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 da. So I end up with never changing the quality. It's supposedly a 40-year limited warranty on the paint. Does that mean the paint's going to be the same color? No. What it means is 40 years from now, the paint will still be there in theory. If not, then, you got a limited warranty otherwise. 40 years. So I learned a lot about touch-up paint. It comes in like a little fingernail polish bottle. I learned early on that they had some that what they said early on was you put your screws in the flat. There's some lower ribs in the flat. You put your screws there. Then they said, no, you can't. You have to put the screws in the rib at the tallest part of the metal. I'm like, well, that's not what your, information sheet and your color chart shows. I was like, oh, we got to change that. So because of me, they had to change. Oh, we got to change the color chart. So that it shows the screws going through the rib. Even then, if you come to a cut on the rib, if a cut goes through the rib, and it will, you have to worry about siphoning, which would be where the ribs lap one over the other. The water can get up inside that rib and then go down on the lower side. So you have to seal it so it doesn't do that, or seal it really well on top so it doesn't do that. And so what they were saying is, hey, we have this engineered caulking. You got to use this or you don't have a warranty. So I would use this caulking, and my experience with silicone and everything else to this day is it all shrinks. Okay. So you come back the next day and there'll be holes. Whenever it's dry, there'll be holes. Some of them you can't even see. They're small holes because it shrinks. And so I just got so tired of having to go back and fix drywall, having leaks around penetrations, using their engineered caulkings, real expensive. Back then it was $10 a tube, and it's that much now for a good silicone. But every time I had problems with holes. So I just got, what, I'm going back to tar. I'll carry the warranty myself, and if there's a problem. So, here I am thinking, oh, these, everybody's saying that you can't do this, you can't do that, and I'm going to have to do everything on my own because it's the only logical thing to do because of all the repetition. It forced me to look at it. So that's where the rounded metal roof came to be stripped down. You always had the option, but whenever people start talking about, like, all your trim is around $2 a foot, and that's not counting labor. When it means you got to go get it, bring it back, set up underneath there to get all that connected, and have a softened fascia. You're talking a lot, almost as much time, say 75% as much time to do the softened fascia as it is to do the whole of the roof. And people generally don't want to pay for that extra. Not when it's a mobile home. Hey, I'm going to end up moving this home away. I'm going to build a house in the back, and I'm going to just get rid of this home. And by the way, a lot of the metal roofs that I've done have rolled down the road.
Screws. I'm Tilder's family. Phil, going to put a metal roof over a mobile home deck. Should I use bolts or screws to secure it to the mobile home?
Always use screws. 1.5 inch metal to wood. That's what they call it. So you're going through the metal and into wood. 1.5 inch generally will do what you want it to do. That's you can do 2 inch if you want. It's going to be, it won't be the metal roof that peels off. It will be the 1x4s that peel off, or the 2x6s or 2x4s that you frame the roof with. If you don't fasten those with screws, a high wind will come along and rip it off. It won't be the metal that comes off if you put it on with screws. So, and you can, and I've gotten to where I don't use the metal brackets anymore. If you're getting inspected and they say you got to do it, you can do that. But what I end up doing is 14 and a half 2x4s or 2x6s, whatever you're using for the porch cover. I put a 2x6 again in between, and I fasten one to the other, and I fasten to the 2x6 behind it. So in between, it's like, you know, a piece of wood, just solid. That works better for me. So screws, they give them to you with the gaskets. You'll find that you'll get very good at it. I don't use any nails for anything except for finish nails on trim. And so there's your answer on that. Always use screws, and you'll hold up to wind. I've had one metal roof that I did over 2 single wides. I framed it up. Again, this was with 3.5 metal stud, hollow metal stud, and stripped it all. It went through a lot of high winds, but a tornado came and pulled out the middle in the peak. So I went back over there. It took me a day and a half, 2 days to put it all back together. And it was there for another 10 years, and then they sold those two. And the guy that was moving it wanted to know how I did it. I said, it's all done with screws. Oh, okay. Well, I just thought maybe you had a trick or something. I was like, yeah, it's done with metal stud and screws. That's the only roof I've ever had to go back and fix metal. That was because of a tornado. I have had on houses several times. I've had trees come down and poke holes in them and have to replace the metal. I don't know if I should count that, but most of that was on houses. They're not on mobile homes. Usually what happens is mobile homes have shingle roofs, and then a roof gets tore up because of high winds peeling off shingles, or a tree falls and hits that roof and pokes limbs through. So the insurance says, oh, you've got to nail down a tarp and put wood all the way around. So now you're literally putting more holes in it, and try to encourage that water not to go where the hole is. So usually, and to this day, there's virtually no shingle bill that's going to beat my price. As far as I know, there's not ever been one. Now, if you are just stuck on shingles, there's plenty of guys out there that will do shingles.
You just don't.
I don't like doing it because I know it's going to have my name on it down the road. So the metal roof it's always been 1.5 inch metal to wood for holding that metal on. Early on, I didn't need 1.5 inches, but I did it anyway because you could do 1 inch, but you weren't going through the rib then. You were going through the flat part of the metal. I'd say 15, 16 years ago, they were saying, you know, that's what you need to do. Don't do it in the ribs because it could leak. Now anyway, the Prodex and Double Bubble, it changed everything. I don't have to carry.
Amazing.
Don't have to carry a great big trailer load of foam and try to strap it all down and drive down the road at 50 miles an hour, trying to keep that foam from just tearing into pieces.
It's got the brooder house. The brooder house is not getting that hot. Even when it's like 80 degrees, the brooder house is staying within temperature.
Yeah, we that was actually framed without any insulation, and I had some extra pieces, so I put it in between the 2x4 roof joists and stapled it on the sides, 2 to 3 layers. Now the regular foam and the 3/4 foam and the foil foam, all around the same. They're like an R9 rating, and the double faced Double Bubble and others are all about R9. I don't have enough research to tell you how much reduction in insulation value there is, but it's not enough to be concerned about. I do know that foam eventually fails, not totally, but it does not hold up to constant. And by the way, a lot of high end houses and commercial buildings are built with that foam. It's called EFIS systems, which is exterior insulated finish system. Uh, you know, you're supposed to use a specific type of not really plaster, but something similar to plaster to have a 30-year warranty. Well, people decided, hey, we need to change the color, and I don't want to pay for this high end setup material to put on there. We'll just paint it. Well, when you do that, the material that's on that foam, that EFIS system, is meant to breathe in and out, so it gets the moisture out of the foam. Whenever you seal it with paint, it looks good, but what happens is all that moisture goes down the foam, and usually, commercial in this area is still using a lot of wood. Not there's more and more metal going in now, but I was always surprised in this area how far behind, 15, 20 years behind Austin they were. So what was going on is that foam would just run water all the way down to the bottom and rot out all the 2x4s and the framing again and again and again. And of course, they were trying to go after the different brands. Hey, this didn't work. It's sweated and it's got moisture down in here. And they go out there and they see they painted it. So I do know that foam requires some moisture removal, like some air removal. But you don't have the same situation. That is like less than a quarter inch of sort of like plaster on the surface of the foam. So again, we have that difference in temperature from the outside, the sun hitting it, or really cold temperatures and it's warm on the inside, or cold on the outside, warm, and then hot on the outside and cool. That moisture ends up collecting in the foam and going down the framework. That's in wood. Would never had that issue with metal, but you're not supposed to paint that EFIS system, and you see it over and over again. Oh yeah, we got this paint, it breathes. I've had, it's like so anyway.
Well, do I need a ledger board to connect the roof frame to face a mobile home, and what size screws to hold roof frame against the siding?
You're going to use 3-inch screws on that. And if you try to use lag bolts or anything like that, remember most of your mobile homes do not have a double plate up there. Do not have 1.5-inch metal or wood studs. They have 1.25 inch, and on the top it might only be 1.25 inch on top, maybe even a 1x4. So you gotta be creative and don't pull the screws till they strip out. So you're not using lag bolts, you're using screws. And you can find that metal or that wood, you can see where the wood is, and sometimes you can hit the 1x2s or 1.25 by 2-inch mobile home framing in there. You can see it, or you can sometimes push the metal and feel it, but most of the time you can see it on a masonite siding because it's got the nails starting to poke up through the paint, and you can see where it is. So you're fastening under okay. The real issue gets to be, do you use a 2x6 or a 2x4? Over that door of a mobile home, you don't have much room to get a 2x6 and still open the door without it hitting the bottom of the 2x6. And then if you go up to the top of the mobile home, that's okay if you're going to do metal roof over onto that. You can put a transition piece of metal over the lower part and under the upper part whenever you do that. If that's the case, you're going to do it. But if you're not doing it right away, you're going to end up having to be creative with your flashing to keep the water running over over your your metal roof for your porch cover. Um, so let me see if I can get myself in trouble with all these master craftsmen and wood. 2x4s generally will stretch out and get you. You could probably get 8 foot out of it. It's stretching a little bit uh, before you need to support it. And generally that's what you're going to do is you're going to do a metal a framework out of 2x4s and maybe an 8 foot deck. If you do larger than that, you're going to need to support it. On underneath the deck on 2x6s, I try not to go more than 6 feet. But a metal roof is totally different. There's nowhere near the weight. Nobody's walking on the roof as a whole. So I recommend you use a 2x4s for 8 foot, and then if you're going to 10 foot stretch, you need to go to 2x6s. There's where your problem comes in, is you don't have enough room over the top of that door, so that when the door opens out, it doesn't hit on that. So you end up having even with a 2x4, you can have conflict there. You may end up having to cut down those in that area. But that's what you remember now. You have 2x4, then you have 1x4, and then you have metal. So you're talking at 3 5/8, 3/4 to 7/8 for the 1x4, and then 3/4 to 7/8 for the metal. So what is that? 3.5, 4 1/4, 5 inches, and you need to be underneath that gutter as a rule. And if you take that gutter, if you can get underneath that gutter, you can fold that gutter onto the metal and literally encourage all that water to go onto the roof. They make a gasket, it's called a foam closure, for over the top of the ribs. There's an over foam closure, which goes over the ribs of the metal, and there's an under foam closure that goes underneath the metal. And that's not one I use a lot of unless I'm doing a transition from a higher roof to a lower roof. Sometimes I might do that. It's more about feeling the screw and not stripping it out. There's your biggest issue. You're not going to use lag bolts. I tried. That doesn't work for mobile homes. Occasionally that you find one that's made out of 2x6s. They were paid for to survive cold weather up north. And they'll have 2x6 walls, more insulation, so on and so on. There were some Windsor homes and a few others that did 2x4 walls, not true 2x4, but 1 5/8 by 3, whatever they can to save a little bit of money. But they are closer to a 2x4. You have a better shot of hitting those. But they really skimped on above the doors. Most of the time it's just 1x4s, and they're not just doing it to save money, although that is always a motive. They also have to keep it lightweight and flexible to go down the road and not weigh too much. The heavier it weighs, the more whenever it bounces, it's trying to break that thing in half. So the frame itself will not carry the weight of that mobile home with no furniture in it. So you got to understand the design of this thing is meant to be flexible so that when you go through a ravine and you drag the bottom, it can bend a little bit or a lot and survive it. In theory, it will crush the drywall, smash mirrors inside, but it will survive, and you go on, you could fix it. So these homes are not, you don't want to pass it on as just being cheap. It is cheap to fit a budget. But it's also meant to be flexible and capable of going down a road.
Two more questions.
What's the next question?
The first one from Duracell 8 is, can he demonstrate how the metal framing is ran 2 foot on center at a diagonal like 1x4s when doing a metal roof? And then the other is, I want to build a metal roof with a 6-inch overhang that is thick, high enough to allow me to install gutters.
So you want a fascia, which fascia soffit. Um, you can do it with a 2x4. You can hang your metal over and put a 2x4, and then whenever you do that, you're going to have to slip a J channel of such, not a J channel, drip edge or rake and corner underneath the metal to hold that up. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can do it. I had metal, if it's only a 6-inch overhang, I had the guys make a piece of metal that went 2 inches underneath the metal roof, came down 3 inches, and then back over, I think it was 7 inches, and then I had a lip up, or a lip, I think it was a lip down, so I could literally make my whole soffit and fascia in one piece. I could put it up there. The problem got to be if it's a rounded roof, the outside corners and that rounded peak on the top. Well, you really got to be creative with that. But now, can you build out a metal stud? Yes. And you can do it quite easily. So how would you do it? That's the cheapest way, the way I told you with that metal. I actually made so you're trying to get a gutter. Gutters are great. There's better ways now to keep the leaves from catching in there, but there is no gutter, and I'm speaking from having to fix them. There is no gutter that does not require regular maintenance. Okay, but that's okay, because everything requires maintenance. Relationships cost, your body, everything has got maintenance. There is no maintenance things. There are things that require less maintenance, and everybody thinks a shingle roof, well, you don't have any maintenance on it. Well, yes, you do. You're just not doing it. And so whenever they go to do the shingle roof, they say, well, we got to replace all this plywood. Okay, that's when you're paying for it, and you're paying for it dearly. So anyway, everything requires maintenance. The more there's it's called the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay, I'm not saying you're stupid for wanting gutters. I'm just saying you're going to have maintenance with the gutters that you might not have had otherwise. So how do you do it? You can use drip edge like a regular house. You can frame it beforehand. You can frame it afterwards. That's an elaborate discussion. I haven't done it in a while because most people are like, you know what, I'll deal with the line in my yard. I'll put bushes there, and the bushes look great, or flowers, you know. The biggest problem I have with gutters is in this area is ice and snow catch in there. They melt, that, you know, comes down, catches a little bit on those gutters, even with protection, even with foam. It catches, freezes, catches, freezes, and it gets where it tries to pull the gutter off.
He wants to control the water going down the side.
So you just need 6-inch overhang or more. You will have eliminated all your, you know, worries about your windows and doors and all the other transitions that sometimes are in metal-sided mobile homes, or even particularly masonite. A gutter, though, yeah, I understand. I'm not the least bit picking on you. I just want you to know you're adding more expense and you're adding more maintenance. Just when you have a pretty woman, you have more expense and you have more maintenance. Okay? It's not that you shouldn't be with a pretty woman. It's just that they cost more, generally. So, you know, you can do the metal gutter yourself, or you can have it done. It's way ahead to go ahead and pay the I don't know, it might be $5 a foot now. And you got to remember that they count that by the foot for the downspouts. You can get whatever size metal made. And I know a lot of people think, well, I can only buy this metal that they supply at Home Depot or Lowe's, but They will make the metal for you if you give them the size that you need. But mind you, once they deliver it the way you said, you've got to pay for it. And even if it don't work, so measure twice, cut once. What you're gonna do is have the if you want to put soffit. Now, what I used to do would put I would use metal stud, so I'd put the track against the house, and then I stopped doing that and cut the track in half, and then I would fasten the track to the house at the height of 3.5 inches down from the edge of the metal, and then I would come out and then go up to the metal, whatever it is I had for, and I've used a lot of different things, the drip edge or the rake and corner, and all of it would be done out of metal stud, and then I would put, a lot of times, to this day, I have a lot of vinyl skirting that people got rid of, and I just keep it for soffit and fascia. And by the way, plastic is more expensive than aluminum soffit. Plastic is more expensive than aluminum soffit. The fascia, plastic probably is going to be more expensive than the aluminum fascia. I don't know why. I just know that it is. But anyway, you have you would do your framework, then you do your soffit, and then you do your fascia, which is an L shape that covers over and goes underneath whatever drip edge or rake and corner. Rake and corner is 3.5 by 3.5, unless you get a residential rake, which is 2.5 by 2.5. You can actually get a residential drip edge, which is like 1.5 inches for a metal roof, and it has a flat area on top. But that requires having plywood or something like that framework, which I was telling you I was using metal stud, or you can do it with wood. It's an elaborate, much more work, but it does make for a nice looking house. I'm just trying to tell you that there's a lot more work to it. I haven't done one in a while.
Do we have a video on one? I don't think we do.
I've only been doing videos for 4 years. And that's really actually only 3 years. Not very many 4 years ago. But I can't take you guys along with everything I do. Like I took out a walk-in freezer refrigerator for Thursday. And and I did so much more than that. I took out all the other stuff that the other ones, they had an ice maker that somebody put in, and I took the copper out and took the electrical out and took all the electrical back into the panel. I patched in his drywall where he had used to have a stove years and years ago when he put that in. And I loaded it all up, and then he had a deli case that had not quit working, but he still was using it to make sandwiches on. He couldn't get it out. He had to carry it. We brought it in by having 5 or 6 guys help him lift it over the bar, and then rolling in through the door, and he couldn't get it. I didn't want to do it again, and said I can get it apart. So I tore it apart and took it out, the door. And I did I fixed his garage door. I just didn't have time to do videos, and he was kind of, I've known him for 20 years. He probably don't want me to video everything. A lot of times people don't want me to video. So I've done a whole lot of stuff that has not been on video. If I can give people discounts, I'm already dramatically cheaper. That I have enough so that guys get irritated with me in the area and tell me that I'm too cheap. But if I can do it a little cheaper, maybe they would say, okay, well, go ahead and, video. There are some people that, because I've done roofs for very, very cheap. I've traded work on people's houses for a broken down lawnmower. Now I have like 12, 14 riding lawnmowers that don't work. So I've traded for cars and things like that. But, those people, well, they don't care if I do a video. They was like, oh, you go ahead. You're crazy as all get out for doing it so cheap as I'm so thankful. Whatever. So I don't always get to show you guys that, But at some point, when I get mobile home park that I have back up to where I need it to be, I'll have the ability to take some of the labor and show you those things. But if you notice, if you go through all the videos that are out there, there's a wide range of things, a lot of different things that I've been involved with. And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that
As the editor and the person who tries to organize them, he's not bragging.
there's a lot of different things, from metal buildings to moving houses, um, working in restaurants, working in commercial buildings, doing electrical, plumbing, drywall, finishing, in all kinds of situations. There's a lot that you guys have not been, able to see. And I'm not, what I'm wanting to do is share with you guys my adventures and how I learned. And that's what this whole conversation was today. So I will look into at some point on one of my places, and maybe on somebody else's, the different ways that I've dealt with the soffit and fascia. But you're going to be framing, and I would suggest that you could use like fasten a drip edge on a 2x4 or a 2x6, and then fasten the screw through the drip edge and the 2x6, and that holds it. And if you're hanging off the mobile home about 6-8 inches, it will hold the metal. You could literally walk on some of it. I wouldn't put much weight on it, but I weigh 270. So then you once you do that, all you've got to do is put J channel or F channel on the mobile home, and then you can slide soffit material into that J and fasten it to the 2x6. So you don't have to do all that extra framing. And then once you do that soffit underneath, you do your L-shaped fascia underneath the drip edge, and which is, it's right here. It goes underneath the drip edge and then covers over the edge of the soffit. There you go. And you're welcome to text me and ask other questions. You guys have any comments, any things that you want me to tell you what I've experienced, I'll be happy to do that. I'm feeling, sometimes when I'm doing these discussions, I'm actually talking to my boys, who are young. They're 23. So I'm 40 years older than they are. And my experiences I would like to pass on to them. And so they might hear me, but may not stick in their head. But if there's a video available, they can learn from it. So even if nobody listens to it, maybe my boys can pick up something. They can watch videos, and it helps my heart that I can help other people, and I'm very happy to help other people do it themselves. We're in a recession, whether they want to call it or not.
We're in a freaking depression.
Yeah, so they didn't, if you remember 2008, 2010, they never said anything while we were in the middle of it.
Until after.
So now it's called the Great Recession. This is going to be worse. So I think that we need to help each other figure out how to get through things. And I'm happy to help my fellow man. It makes my heart sing. I feel grateful to all the people that get some kind of benefit from. They can do it their own way. It's not like you got to do it my way and there's nothing. I deal with all the other guys who say, well, a 3-year-old monkey could do better. I was like, well, why don't you get your own channel and show us all how to do it instead of just criticizing? But most of them, they're not wanting to. They're just wanting to say things and not be held accountable for it, like you would on comments on Facebook or something. I don't know. I don't. My wife puts things on Facebook, but I don't interact on Facebook because it kind of feels like. You ever seen dogs barking through a chain link fence? Anybody can say anything. And TikTok is not any better in all the comments there. Everybody says whatever they want. You would never, in my day when I was young, you would never say those things to somebody else. You'd get poked in the nose.
FAFO.
Yeah, so, I appreciate that everybody has their own viewpoints on how to get it done, and I am not perfect. Uh, I'm well aware of my imperfections, so I learn all the time. People tell me things, and I pick up on it. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe I could do that. This not this. I'm not at a point where I don't know, and there's nothing else to learn. As a matter of fact, I'm using an app called Skillcat, and I'm trying to learn HVAC, get my certification.
Skillcat, if you would like to sponsor
Right.
us.
It's called Skillcat. Okay, so you can.
Not a sponsor.
Yeah, they're not paying me anything. I'm paying them, by the way. And I'm learning HVAC, get my certification so I can buy the Freon and all that stuff, which I already have quite a lot of experience installing, but there's lots to learn. So I'm going to go through that and get my certifications through a lot of different things in HVAC, and I'm also going to do a whole lot more on solar. That's not only because of me, because I got a lot of people that I deal with that say, "Hey, we need you to do solar because we trust you," and that is a compliment too. So there's constant tool changes. There's new things coming out all the time. So I'm just sharing with you guys, and if I had the time, I would follow you, and I am grateful that you're here. But if you're not, my boys will have this available to them, and whoever else that sees fit. You get to learn all the things that I learned with fast. I had to took me years and years, and you can learn it in just a video or two.
And practice.
Yeah, lots of practice. Practice, they say, makes perfect. Well, I'm not perfect. That didn't work out. And my dad must have messed with a lot of lead paint because I'm a slow learner. That's what lead paint does, by the way. It makes your children become slow learners. So I learned that in an EPA class, which I passed with flying colors. So anyway, hopefully you've learned a little bit. I know it was a little bit random, but how I came to the metal roofing that I have now done.
And any additional questions, throw them in the bottom of this video or in any of the other videos, and we'll try to get to them.
Yeah. I probably will spend a little bit of time talking about my dad. So I know everybody does it, but I think my dad deserves some attention from me. So anyway,
especially considering the news we just got.
So I wish you guys all the best, and I hope everything works out well for you. I'm sure there'll be obstacles, and you can overcome it. I'll see you later.